sick and tired of the high costs and inefficiency plaguing our U.S. healthcare system? Do you feel like you're navigating a maze when dealing with insurance companies, only to end up paying a fortune for basic medical services? Then this Broken Healthcare podcast is for you. So get ready to take control of your healthcare. Here's your host, Ray Kober.
Let's get right into it. Why Broken Healthcare? Why a podcast? Why now? I've spent over the last 2 decades in the insurance industry, in employee benefits, and as a broker, and now as a healthcare consultant. And I've seen the deterioration of healthcare over the span of my career here. And it's time for me to share what I know, because I believe that we're at a tipping point. We're in a bubble in the US as far as healthcare is concerned. We're spending way too much money and we're not getting enough in return. So the idea of the podcast is to share with you, the audience, what I know to help us all become better consumers of healthcare, learn more about the dark underbelly of what's wrong with healthcare, and maybe together we could do something about it. So the idea is the podcast really gives us, it's a platform that gives us a megaphone. So the idea is I'm trying to reach the American people. I'm trying to reach people that are making buying decisions for their employees. And specifically, I'm talking about HR executives, CFOs, CEOs that have bought into healthcare's big lie that there's nothing that you can do about the cost of healthcare. You just have to kind of throw your hands up and resign yourself and your business and your organization to paying more and more year over year over year. Well, that's gotten us into this mess today. And so I regularly help business leaders understand that you don't have to buy into healthcare as a big lie. I regularly save my clients millions of dollars on their healthcare spend, but I can't get to everyone. So the idea is not to use this as a marketing vehicle for my own selfish devices. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a capitalist. I'm not going to turn business away. But the idea of the podcast is to let you know that whether you're dealing with an organization like mine or you go out and you seek the advice of a fiduciary healthcare consultant, someone that's operating in your best interest, and they are out there, the most important thing is that you take action and you stop doing things that are getting you the same results year over year over year. So my story is, I lost my dad shortly after my second birthday. He was an oil burner mechanic and met my mom. It was my mom's second marriage. Unfortunately, she lost her first husband who came back from World War II. He had some type of a congenital heart condition and died prematurely in his mid-20s. And my mom was lucky enough to fall in love and find my dad, years later. And, my brother, Jimmy, came along and then I was my mom's surprise. I don't know what that meant for years, but my mom had me when she was 42 years old. Not long after I was born, my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer, and we're talking back in the 1960s. There really wasn't much that they could do, but they scrambled and they tried as best they could to get him the care that he needed that would hopefully nurse him back to health. They hopped on a plane, they flew out to Dallas, Texas. They met with specialists. Maybe it was Houston. I wasn't there. So this is all kind of second, third-hand information. But the reality is it hits home to what this podcast is all about, because I know firsthand my family has personal experience with dealing with the health crises. And it's not just the patient that is kind of being put through the ringer of the healthcare system. It's all the people who love the patient. It's all their family members. It's their friends. So it touches many, many different lives. Ultimately, my dad, he lost his battle with cancer shortly after my second birthday. And so that, I think, was foundational and led to a calling for me many years later to enter into the insurance industry. And no one signs up and says, hey, I want to be an insurance agent when they grow up, right? When my best friend approached me, and I know my buddy since first grade in grammar school, and said, Ray, you'd be good at insurance, I laughed and I said, I don't want anything to do with it. It's like, I think I'd rather watch dirt dry, if that's a thing. I know paint dry is the expression, but it just felt like dirt to me. And I was like, like, I'm really not interested. But after I kind of gave him the opportunity to tell me about it, and I got to see the people that he worked with, what I really saw was a bunch of people that enjoyed what they did, that looked like they were having fun, that were making a lot of money. And look, I'm not here to tell you that I'm not a capitalist and an entrepreneur, because nothing further could be from the truth. I love money. I believe in the American dream, and I believe that you should dream big, work hard and go after it. And that's what I ended up doing. And it was the best career choice, I think, in hindsight, that I could have made, because it led to a very prosperous career. Anybody in the insurance industry will tell you that you don't want a broke insurance agent, right? You want someone that's going to be prosperous, that's doing well. And if you find people, if you're fortunate enough to seek out people who know what they're talking about, are entrepreneurial, yes, want to make money, but also have compassion and they care and they want to help you, those are the best insurance people, in my humble opinion. So that kind of led me down the road of voluntary employee benefits, working with a world leader. And I've had the privilege of touching hundreds of thousands of lives over the span of more than a 20 plus year career. And it wasn't until kind of 2015 timeframe that I had clients coming to me for more than just voluntary benefits. And I said, I think I could help you with healthcare, but I didn't know the first thing about it. Frankly, I was confused with all the jargon and terminology and deductibles and copays and all that nonsense. But I dove in with both feet. I connected with a general agent, which is like a super broker, if you will, that's plugged into all the insurance carriers. And it was baptism by fire. And so I started helping my clients with traditional healthcare. And it wasn't long into the game that I realized that, hey, I'm no different than any of these other brokers out there. We're all doing the same thing. Insurance rates are regulated. So what value am I really bringing here? And so I never really marketed or went after it in a big way, because I didn't feel like we had a huge value proposition. What am I going to sell you on service? So fast forward, and 2018, I was at a conference and I ran into a guy by the name of Nelson Griswold, who was on stage giving a keynote, and he was talking about broken healthcare in the United States, and everything that he said was resonating with me. And it led me to join his mastermind group, a collection of several dozen like-minded brokers that were tired of bringing their clients the same old garbage every renewal period. Just kind of, walking in with that giant spreadsheet with all the different carriers and saying, well, it looks like we're just going to stick where we are again. And in the meantime, as a broker, and I'm guilty of it too, every year insurance premiums go up, my compensation would go up. And if you're with a status quo broker today, every year that your insurance premiums go up, so too does their compensation. So does the insurance carrier's compensation. And it's a vicious cycle. And we're kind of in a debt spiral now, right? We're going to spend $4.9 trillion in healthcare in 2024. It's a fifth. It's 20 cents of every dollar that we're spending. And so the reality is, what can you do about it? Well, this podcast is dedicated at shining a light on the inequity. It's dedicated at helping you understand why we are where we are. And I got to tell you, if I'm being honest, we're complicit. You and I are part of the problem. And I'll tell you why. We don't ask for the cost of anything in healthcare. If I asked you what's the cost of a half gallon of milk or a dozen eggs, you'd spit it right out, roll right off your tongue. If I ask you what the cost is for an MRI or a CAT scan or a knee replacement, you don't have the first clue. And folks, that's by design. I'm not going to fault you there. The industry has us, the equation that I use is like we're frogs in a pot of water. And if we're on a stove and the insurance industry is slowly cranking up the heat, and if you know anything about frogs in a pot of water, they're cool. As the temperature rises, they're like, hey, this is pretty nice. And before you know it, they're dead. That's where we are in healthcare. We're not asking for the cost of anything. There is complete opacity. And as a leader, as a business leader, if you're tuning in, you have to ask yourself, well, what are we doing to manage this expense? And it all starts with knowing your numbers and being able to measure what you're trying to manage. And so that is part of what we're going to get into on this podcast as well. It's all about helping our audience understand that you don't have to buy into healthcare's big lie. One thing that I'll give you right off the top, one thing that you can do for yourself is if you ever find yourself in an emergent situation, you're in need of emergency medical care. And I'm not talking about, you have a hangnail and you go to the emergency room. And I think there's far too many emergency room visits for non-emergent situations. That's not what I'm referring to. That's a different problem and a story for another day. But if you find yourself needing care in an emergency room, there are two waivers that they're going to ask you to sign. One of those waivers is going to be you agree to have them treat you. That one you have to sign. If you want treatment, you must sign that. The other one that they're going to shove under your bleeding body says you agree to be financially responsible. You do not have to sign that. And so there's something called prevent consent. We're going to share a link so that you have access to that as part of a thank you for you joining us in our inaugural podcast. But medical debt is one of the largest problems in the U.S. today. We have over 100 million people in the U.S. that have medical debt. It's a $220 billion problem. And part of the issue is people sign that financial release when they're in the ER. Well, there's a federal law called EMTALA, Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Law. And that law protects us. They must treat us if we show up at the emergency room and we truly have an emergency. So there's language that you can strike out and write in to protect you in those situations. This podcast is going to be dedicated to helping you, my fellow Americans, understand how to best navigate this system. We're going to have incredible guests on. We're going to tell you some horror stories. But at the end of the day, we don't have to take this shit anymore. So we hope that you subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.
So that's it for today's episode of Broken Healthcare. Head on over to iTunes or wherever you listen and subscribe to the show. One lucky listener every single week who posts a review on iTunes will win a chance in the grand prize drawing to win a $15,000 value private VIP day with Ray Kober himself. Be sure to head on over to brokenhealthcarepodcast.com and pick up a free copy of Ray's gift and join us on the next episode.